Friends, we celebrate a great saint today, Saint Albert the Great, born around 1200, was an intellectual giant, towering figure in the Middle Ages. His influence really shaped a lot of theologians and priests at the time, and even this great Saint Thomas Aquinas. He was probably one of the biggest contributors to science, and specifically the natural sciences, restoring the lost knowledge that Aristotle built up 1,500 years prior. And so his early life and education really was focused on that. He was born in Cologne, and his name was Albertus Magnus. And so to a noble family in Lauingen, Bavaria, so South Germany. He received his early education at the University of Padua. So he traveled a little bit and went to Portugal, which is west of Spain. And he entered into the Dominican Order. So he was inspired by St. Dominic, and it's another reason why I love him to death, because I'm a Dominican at heart. That's my patron name. He also joined the friars at around 22, 23 years old. So around 12, 23, his decision to become a religious set him on a path that would eventually revolutionize all learning, medieval scholarship. Matter of fact, he is one of the key figures to help all of Europe, the West, they would call it, out of the Dark Ages. From 500, after the fall of Rome, 410 really, but from 500 to 1200, there was 700 years of Dark Ages, the bubonic plague, and just a lot of, when the barbarians came down and sacked Rome, they destroyed everything. A lot of knowledge was lost. A lot of the philosophy that was developed over a long period of time, 1,000 years, it's all gone. So his academic career, he taught at various Dominican houses, but really he was the Fulton Sheen of the time at the University of Paris. So that was like the big, that was the place to learn. That was the place to go to school. He earned his doctorate in theology and became a master lecturer. And everyone wanted to hear from him. He was the professor that everyone, wanted to listen to, learn from, because he was brilliant. Albert the Great was absolutely brilliant. He helped form Thomas Aquinas, who was also very, of course, a doctor of the church, brilliant. So they're tied together. Both are doctors of the church. And so he later established a Dominican study center in Cologne, where he attracted students from all over Europe. And this is how he came to befriend Thomas Aquinas. And he was a big dude. Thomas Aquinas he's Italian, he came from a noble family, and they really, bullying was going on then too, and Thomas Aquinas was bullied a lot. They called him the dumb ox, because he was a big dude, and towering figure physically and intellectually. And he spoke he had a silent nature, and that, I guess, makes some people uncomfortable, but he was bullied, and they called him a dumb ox. And actually, it was so well known that everyone called him a dumb ox that even St. Albert the Great commented on it and said to those who were giving him a hard time, he said, "You call him a dumb ox, but I tell you that the whole world is going to hear his bellowing." That's a pretty cool quote from St. Albert the Great, who defended Thomas Aquinas. They had quite a bond as student and master. His intellectual approach, it was revolutionary, really. Albert the Great set the stage and the tone for intellectual learning for all of Europe, getting them entering into the Enlightenment period, which was coming. Albert the Great and some other figures, especially Thomas Aquinas and St. Dominican Francis, and there's several others, but Albert was just, he dabbled in everything. They called him the universal doctor because he approached learning at every area, whether whether it was biology, philosophy, logic, theology, you name it. His conviction that faith and reason should be wedded. I come from the same stock of learning. Same with Bishop Barron and Fulton Sheen and a lot of the great theologians over the years, centuries. That's where we come from. We study philosophy and theology. We study the natural sciences. And all of that was complementary to, at the time, what Aristotle started centuries and centuries earlier. So Albert boldly engaged with, Greek philosophers. He wrote paraphrases and commentary on virtually everything that Aristotle did. And then he dabbled in Plato. And so he revolutionized and resurrected all that was lost since the fall of Rome in 410. So, and actually, it was the Muslim folks during the 700s. Islam came through and really did some damage in North Africa, and the Middle East, and the Fertile Crescent. They killed a lot of people, but there was a lot of, I don't want to say it this way, there was a lot of heresy going on too. And strangely, the Islamic movement at the time, it wasn't really it was very new and fresh, 750s. They just cleared out a lot of the heresies that were going on, from Arianism to Gnosticisms, you name it, Machiavellism, not Machiavelli, what is it? The one that Augustine struggled with. Anyways, Albert was huge. He boldly revolutionized again the education at the time and resurrected a lot of the great philosophers, and we still study them today for all seminaries for the last 800 plus years. They're the intellectual requirements and the standards of study, the areas of science and of metaphysics, philosophy, phenomenology, natural philosophy, all of them, languages even, all of that was brought in by Albert the Great. He really, God used him. He's a towering figure for all that lost knowledge, bringing humanity at the time and out of the Dark Ages into the Enlightenment. His scientific contributions are also here. He wasn't just a theorist and a theologian, but he was a hands-on investigator. Like, he conducted systematic, the scientific method is rooted in these, Thomas Aquinas and Albert the Great, and Aristotle, etc., because that scientific observation that was understood and accepted, whether it's plants, animals, minerals, rocks, you name it, even astronomy, phenomena of, the stars and comets and all those things that were not understood. Albert the Great dabbled in that too. Botany, huge into botany and biology, plants. He studied it in remarkable detail. He's one of the first that correctly identified the Milky Way. Before we understood distant stars, he speculated about the formation of these, not just astronomy, but geography too. Like, he studied mountains, and he studied everything. He was just extremely well-rounded. His approach to everything was everything. That's why they called him the universal doctor. Universalis doctoris. His empirical approach and observation of all things led to the standard, really. Hundreds and hundreds of years later, especially in the 15th, 16th century, when the books were being created, the Gutenberg Bible was created in the late 1490s, and all of a sudden we started recording all of these things, keeping manuscripts and books all the knowledge started to get written down. That's what was going on during these, the 1300s to the 1600s. So that was just his scientific, methodology. It really was scientific revolution that was at the heart of what he was doing. His contributions are still appreciated to this day. In later life, Albert was then appointed bishop around 1260. So at 60 years old, he was the bishop of Regensburg. And everything at that time in the whole church was in disarray a bit. So there was need for Reformation even then, before the Protestant Reformation. So reform came, seminaries, and how the church worked and functioned and governed. There was a lot of change in the 12th, 13th century. There's a reason why there was a Franciscan movement, a Dominican movement, and these towering figures helped reform the church, administratively wise. So he took, and Albert this is a great story about how he didn't want to be a bishop, and they kind of tricked him. He tried to hide, actually. They found him, I think, in the goose. Gosh, where is it? It got known that they were trying to find him, so he was hiding. They found him, the geese gave him up, so the legend goes. And they found him hiding in a goose pen. They dragged him out and threw him in the church, literally, and said, "You're our bishop." And he was kind of raggedy. He was not the type, The pomp and circumstance was not his thing. He's kind of like Saint. He was like Dominican, Franciscan. He was a religious, so poverty was part of his nature. But he reformed it pretty good. He effectively reformed how bishops govern. A lot of canon law has been changed during this time too. Its history, especially how church governs, and basically the chain of command. Moving on, his administrative duties were so burdensome, though, that he resigned. He didn't like it at all. He went back to teaching and writing, kind of like Pope Benedict did when he resigned as Pope. So he kind of did the same thing. Albert the Great reminds me of, actually, Benedict the 16th, Cardinal Ratzinger, who's also extremely intelligent, well-rounded, wrote a lot of powerful works for our day and age. He reminds me of Albert the Great. So he spent his final years in Germany, Cologne, and he started to decline a bit in 1278 around. So he was 78 years old, reaching 80, and he later died in 1280. So at 80 years old, and we celebrate his life November 15th. So here's the thing. Albert was so good that his collected works filled 38 volumes, spanning every area of science, every area of math, medicine, history, biology, astronomy, geography, philosophy, metaphysics, you name it, and he was a great theologian. Even zoology. I mean, he was obsessed with learning. That's why he's one of my favorite heroes. He just demonstrated basically that the intellectual inquiry, the rigorous one that he had, helped, with his deep Christian faith, revolutionize science and religion. Basically, I'm always for, they complement each other. Faith and reason, religion and science actually complement each other better than separating them. So his legacy really was so powerful that it transformed Thomas Aquinas, and then it continued on. Unfortunately, Thomas Aquinas died young. He hit his head on something as he was traveling. He was only 49 years old. But Thomas Aquinas continued what Albert did, and he's founding all of these Dominican houses for learning. That's why Dominicans are highly educated, excellent preachers, but they are profound theologians. Albert the Great, Thomas Aquinas are two of the pillars of that order. That's why I love that order of death. I almost became one. So Yeah, he was canonized in 1931, and he's the patron of scientists. Who go figure? And so he's one of my great saints. Look him up, Saint Albert the Great. We celebrate his feast today. God bless, and I'll see you at Mass.